Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Fast Keto. I am so excited to have Dr. Jose Antonio joining us today. He has done some incredibly interesting work with protein overfeeding studies and found some really surprising and remarkable results in his studies, which we're going to dig into today. So I know you guys are going to be super interested to hear all about his work. If you like the episode, be sure to share it with someone that you think might enjoy it too. And if you have a moment, leave me a rating or review because I absolutely love hearing from you guys and hearing what you love about the show and what your takeaways and insights were. So without further ado, here is the episode with Dr. Jose Antonio. Welcome, Dr. Antonio. Thank you so much for being here today on the Fast Keto podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I think I'm sure we'll have a good conversation here. So we're all sort of stuck inside. However, in South Florida, I just want to let everyone know, it seems like more people are exercising than ever. Everyone's outside exercising. So that's a good thing.
It is, absolutely. They're motivated to stay healthy, keep their immune system strong. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show today is to talk about some of your work and research, which you've done quite a bit of, extensive research, especially on protein. Can we start off just by talking about some of your protein overfeeding studies and what are some of the results that you saw there that may surprise people?
Yeah, I guess let me start off with a story and why I even went down this path.
Yeah.
Back when I was in college, this is going way back. I was in college as a biology major back when Ronald Reagan was president. So we're talking the 1980s. And I remember my nutrition professor, I took one nutrition class, and I remember her saying that eating a lot of protein is bad for your kidneys. And I thought, well, that's really odd because I know my uncle was a bodybuilder, and so I was exposed to that group of people. And I said, I know a lot of people who eat a lot of protein, and they're pretty healthy to me. I don't see where this is coming from. So that's sort of how I was introduced to it. I subsequently got a biology undergrad degree, a master's in exercise phys, a PhD in cell biology, focusing on muscle physiology. And then once I graduated, I started to shift more to sports nutrition. So sort of went through a lot of years there. Fast forward to the middle of, it was like 2013, I believe. I'm teaching at a university in South Florida called Nova Southeastern University. And I noticed this one gentleman who, one of my students who would, and you probably see this all the time. He always had a bottle of water or a jug of water, and he always had food. He was always eating. During class, he's always eating. And I don't care if you eat during class, to be honest. So one day I asked him, so how much do you eat? Like how many calories, how much protein? And the great thing about people who do bodybuilding, especially guys, they know exactly what they eat. I mean, exactly. They can tell you the grams of fat, the grams of protein, the grams of carbs. It's the one group of, and I use the term athlete loosely because even bodybuilders tell me they're not athletes, but, he knew to a T how many grams of protein he was getting. And then I sort of did the calculation, grams per kilo. I'm like, wow, you're eating well over 3 grams per kilo per day. I mean, that's actually not easy to do. That's a lot of, one, it's a lot of eating, two, it's a lot of protein. So I was thinking, you know what? Why don't we do a study, and this is like a year later, do a study where all we do is get people who train and we just make them eat a lot of protein. And so it's a lot of protein. And I thought, let's go really high. So we went up to 4.4 grams per kilo, which is a lot of protein. It's a lot. And 8 weeks, we told them, don't change your training. All we want you to do is eat a lot of protein. And we provided basically tubs of whey protein for them to consume. So this is 4.4 grams per kilo. If you think in pounds, it's 2 grams per pound of body weight. And after 8 weeks, this is what's interesting, after 8 weeks of basically just eating a bucket full of whey protein every day, nothing happened. Meaning body composition didn't change. They didn't gain weight, they didn't gain fat, they didn't gain muscle. It was like nothing. Which kind of makes sense in a way because, protein has quite a high thermic effect. Maybe promotes NEAT or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that study was this. We had a lot of people dropping out. They literally said, you know what? I thought this would be easy to overeat, but it's actually not easy. It's work. It's work. And so I think we had 25% dropouts. There was a lot of dropouts, and they said, I just can't eat this much.
Yep.
I can't. I'm like, okay, well, and to this day, there's this one gentleman who says, I'm never touching protein powder again. I'm never touching. You made us eat way too much of this stuff. So I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe that was too high. So the next study, we thought, we'll drop the dose down to about 3 to 3.3 grams per kilo, right? But we're going to put them on a bodybuilding program. That's your basic split routine, you know, back bis, chest, shoulder, tries, legs, and we just rotate it. And the results from this were interesting because after 8 weeks of training and eating a high-protein diet, the group that ate the most protein actually had the greatest fat loss. The second study, we dropped the protein intake to about 3 to 3.3 grams per kilo. We put them on a bodybuilding training program. So they're eating a high-protein diet, but they're also training differently. They're training just for bodybuilding. And what we found was that the group that ate more protein actually lost more fat, but they gained the same amount of lean body mass. So it seems like there's a ceiling for which X amount of protein will help you gain lean mass, but above it, it won't. However, it might help you lose fat mass, and that's a good thing. And also, we found that it was safe after 8 weeks. Now, people said, well, 8 weeks isn't long enough to show that protein's harmful because, as you know, protein will kill you. At least that's what the naysayers say. You know, so we decided to follow up with some of the more hardcore bodybuilders, and we did a safety study for 1 year. Basically, excuse me, they loved it because we were giving them free protein.
Yeah.
And, you know, bodybuilders, they love free protein. So basically, here's your protein. Eat as much as you want. Try to stay around 3 grams per kilo if you can. Do it for a year. So after 1 year, we, again, did post measures of blood. Nothing. No effect on kidney function, liver function, nothing after 1 year. Now, the naysayers said, well, what if you go longer? And I'm thinking, wow, they keep changing the goalposts on me.
Yeah.
So we decided to get the 5 most hardcore bodybuilders. And we said, hey, how about we just keep giving you free protein? They're like, okay, sure. We love protein. And we'll follow you for another year. So it'll be 2 years. And after 2 years, nothing. We didn't find anything. No change in kidney function, liver function. So I think it's safe to say that if you're on a high protein diet, even for up to 2 years, and I'd say for however long you want, it's not harm your kidneys or liver or anything. And I think this is the caveat. I think where people lose this when they start criticizing the amount of protein these people eat. The only people who do this are people who work out a lot. If you're sedentary, I don't know any sedentary people who go to the grocery store and say, you know what? I'm going to buy me a big tub of whey protein and I'm going to eat a lot of it. Nobody does that unless you train like crazy. So in a sense, we're talking about a very select and tiny group of people who train like crazy and eat a lot of protein. So basically, you're dealing with super healthy, fit people. Now, the average person who doesn't train, believe me, they're lucky if they get, 1 gram per kilo. I mean, it's ungodly low. And from my experience with sedentary people, when we've measured intake, they don't eat much protein. It's really kind of strange.
It is, right. And you look at the RDA, which is 0.8 grams per kilograms, which was really just established as a minimum. And it's been taken as a recommendation for total amount.
Yeah, I agree. It's like it's like the floor. It's the bare amount you need. Certainly for people who train, they need a hell of a lot more than that. And I think having worked with athletes for many, many years, they typically overestimate how much protein they eat. Once they start logging and tracking what they eat, they're like, wow, I actually don't eat as much as I thought. I mean, people think they have 1 glass of milk, they're good. And it's like, no, you got to do a lot more than that. You got to do a lot more than that.
Now, in the studies, were people eating just pure protein only, so no carbohydrate, no fat with it?
Oh, no, they were eating, basically the way I set it up is I want to make it as simple as possible. I tell them, don't change your diet. If you eat clean or healthy all the time, keep doing it. If you eat junk all the time, keep doing it. All we want you to do is bump your protein intake via the whey protein we provide. So on average, in fact, after all these studies, I'd say we went through probably 100, 150 subjects. It seems like they were on average eating, I'd say 40% protein, and then maybe 30-ish% fat and carbs. That seemed to be where it tended to fall. And clearly bodybuilders tended to be high on the protein. Performance athletes, they tended to be probably lower on the protein, higher on the carbs.
It's so interesting because, we can overeat so many, we can overeat carbs, we can overeat fat, but it's so difficult to overeat protein. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's funny. My daughter, I have twin daughters in college, and we always joke that we all go out to dinner. We can be full, but we always have room for sugar, like basically sugar and fat. Most desserts are basically combined sugar and fat. It's very odd that we have these foods that are so palatable that you can literally be busting at the seams from eating, but you still have room to have dessert. Whereas if I'm full, the last thing I want to do is drink milk, have a piece of steak, eat chicken, eat eggs. I just don't. But you put a cookie in front of me, I'm like, yeah, I'll have a cookie, maybe a cupcake. So I think it's just those kinds of foods just taste a lot better than protein.
I wonder if it could also be the storage site. There's an unlimited potential storage for, carbohydrates and hydrates of carbon, but for amino acids, we're limited, right, in terms of how much storage?
Yeah, and actually that brings up an interesting point that we can literally store. I mean, you see shows now where people are not just obese, they're grotesquely obese. I mean, for 600 pounds, 900 pounds, we have this amazing capacity to store energy, and it actually makes evolutionary sense that our tongues or our brains are geared towards getting high calorie foods easily, because your body's just thinking, I just want to survive. Who knows? Maybe there's an apocalypse and there's no food, and you literally have to live off your own body fat for, I don't know, days, weeks before you find food. So it actually makes sense that hyper palatable foods that typically are high in sugar and fat, humans love to eat that stuff.
Yeah, we're literally wired to go after it and to sort of shut off our satiety. Whereas with protein, there's a reason why no one ever wins those free steaks at the restaurant, and they know that, because you just get to a point and your body's like, no, it really just refuses to take more in.
Have you tried to do those 48-ounce steak contests?
A 48-ounce would be probably, I really want to do one of those contests because I can put down a lot of protein, a lot of meat. I bet I could probably get close, but I've never really done 48 ounces like in one sitting. It would be, but I wouldn't put it past me. I honestly,
that would be impressive. I'd have to see that. That's a lot of meat. Wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty petite, and I get looks all the time on the amount of protein and fat that I can put down. But I understand the biochemistry of it and how it works, and I love eating protein. But it's interesting because we're taught to limit it so much. We're told to fear it. It's bad for the kidneys. It's bad for our organs and all of this. And yet, a lot of research is showing actually it's good for our organs to be eating protein. I mean, it's amino acids. It's the building blocks for all of our tissue, for our enzymes, for hormones, for all these, really vital functions that we need in the body. So it's so interesting in your studies because it's so counterintuitive to think that, I know in one study you had people eat high protein and then even higher protein, and those people ended up even less body fat, which is so counterintuitive.
Yeah, and what's interesting about some of those studies, and I was going to ask you, well, how much do you eat, by the way? Do you know your grams per kilo of protein?
I do about 2 pounds a day of meat. So usually I end up around 200 grams of protein per day. And I'm not very active. Like I've been in school, for the last couple of years. I don't train with like big weights or anything.
You're small, you said.
Like I'm tall, but I'm like petite. I just don't have a lot of extra like weight on me, and I don't have a ton of lean mass either.
Well, I remember there was a subset of subjects who would come into the lab for post testing, and I always ask them, well, any side effects? I mean, things are normal, and invariably, the one thing a lot of them mentioned was, and I remember this one particular very petite girl. She must have been, maybe 100 pounds. She was tiny. And she said, she was one of our best subjects. She could eat like a lot. She says, I was hot, constantly sweating. She said it was so uncomfortable that when she'd go to bed, remember this is South Florida, so it's hot outside anyways, she would lay in bed, turn the fan on, and just lay there just to cool herself off. She says she was literally just sweating all the time. I was like, oh, wow, that doesn't sound comfortable.
Yeah, I guess I get that too, like the meat sweats, and I guess it's a thermic effect, right? That you're just burning off all this energy. I'm really curious. I just had Dr. Don Lehman on the show this week, and some of the research he's done has pointed to the fact that protein is converted at a rate of about 100 grams of protein consumed will turn into about 60 grams of glucose. And, there's so many differing opinions in the space of different scientists I speak to. I just had Dr. Ben Bickman on right before you, and he's like, gluconeogenesis is 100% demand-driven. It's not supply-driven, and he points to other research. So I'm curious what your opinion is on gluconeogenesis and whether it's supply or demand-driven or somewhere between the two.
Well, I think in general, you start to make new glucose if the demand is there. If the demand's not there, there's no point in making it. I mean, right. I think the human body works very well in that it tries to get what it's need. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't engage in superfluous activities. Now, I'm not familiar with the exact numbers that you mentioned in terms of what Don Lehman says about how many grams of protein can convert to glucose. He does, I think he's done a lot of those kinds of acute studies looking at that kind of metabolism, whereas I've always thought, and this is where science gets interesting, because when you look at what different labs do, a lot of them focus on acute feeding. So they say, here's a bolus of protein, let's follow it for the next few hours. And I've always thought, do you watch baseball or softball, or do you know these sports?
I get them. I get how they work.
Okay, so in baseball you have 9 innings, and I've always viewed those super short acute studies as watching the first inning of a baseball game. It tells you something, but it doesn't tell you anything. So that's why, at the end of the day, I think you have to do what I call time course studies. You have to give stuff to people and follow them over weeks and months, because that's the only way you'll actually know what happens. Because even, like, for instance, these comparisons of like different kinds of protein and how it affects muscle protein synthesis, acutely, like you do this, and over the next 6 to 8 hours, whey protein is greater than soy or whatever. But it doesn't matter, because people eat mixed meals over the course of days, weeks, months, years. No one just eats whey, and no one just eats soy. People eat meals. So when you're eating meals over weeks and months and years, it almost doesn't matter what one acute feeding does. It's a snapshot. I call it, you're taking a snapshot, but you really want to shoot a movie. And what's a movie? Movies are these, 8, 12, 6-week studies, 6-month studies, things like that. So the acute stuff I find interesting, from an academic point of view, but at the end of the day, I need to see studies that at least last several weeks, just because that's the only way you'll find out if it does anything.
Right. And I like that a lot of the research that you did was, continuous, and you followed up with the subjects later on. But I guess, do you have any theories as to why in the studies that overconsumption of protein had no deleterious effects? Is it because that excess protein, once the muscle protein synthesis, levels are reached, that excess protein is just being oxidized and utilized as fuel and sort of maybe turned into, glucose?
No, I think you're right. I think once your body meets its needs for protein, whether it's muscle protein synthesis, turnover in organs, turnover in skin, you're probably just going to oxidize it, right? Because you can't store it. Now, I think your prior question was, why have we found no evidence that this causes harm? And I think, and that's how typically, if you look at clinical nutrition, they're taught with, I guess, with the underlying premise that it could be harmful, which I've always found that's kind of odd. Why would the underlying premise be it's harmful when you have to get protein to be alive? I mean, it's food like anything else. And so I've never bought into the underlying premise that it could be harmful. And the typical reason is the breakdown products of protein are urea. You got to get rid of urea through, the kidneys and nephron. It comes out of your urine, and that all of that urea has to be processed, and it causes excess work to the kidneys, when in fact that's the same argument physicians gave in the 1960s and 70s, saying exercise is bad for the heart. Why? Because it makes your heart work harder. Well, yeah, it makes your heart work harder, and guess what? Your heart adapts. The human body has a great mechanism for adapting to whatever stress it puts on it. So eating a lot of protein doesn't make, the data shows that it's not harmful, but also think about this, and I think, like, I was a biology undergrad, and I think a lot of people who are going to school now studying the sports sciences or even just nutrition, the one class they don't take is evolution. And that was actually one of my favorite classes. And oftentimes, if you think of this from a sort of an evolutionary perspective, and you ask the question, is it possible to cause harm by eating a lot of protein in one sitting, or just a lot of protein chronically? And it doesn't make evolutionary sense, because when you think about prehistoric man, the most calorically dense food they could eat was probably organs. Liver was probably the most calorically dense because of the fat and all the vitamins. And then you have skeletal muscle, which has some fat in it, and probably skin. Skin has a lot of fat. So if you starve for 2 days and all of a sudden you and your cave buddies have killed a deer or whatever animal, you're hungry as hell. You're going to gorge on that food, on that meat. And if that was overloading your kidneys to the point of death, we wouldn't be alive as a species. So the human body is built to gorge on food, and it should be able to handle a really large bolus of protein. And because otherwise we'd be dead. We should be able to handle that. So from an evolution standpoint, it doesn't even make sense that eating a lot of protein would cause harm to your kidneys. And people say, well, what if you did it all the time? Well, when you think of it, it's very satiating. You try eating a lot of protein all the time. It's hard. I mean, even in these research studies, it's hard for bodybuilders to do. So imagine the average person who's not interested in bodybuilding. Once they're satiated, they stop. They're not just going to, I'm going to chew on a chicken leg for the next, 3 hours. Nobody does that. Nobody does that.
Yeah, you don't sit in front of the TV at night and snack on steak. Not. That sounds actually kind of gross. Watching TV and snacking on steak. It does. It's just wrong. It's really interesting to me with the research that you've done, that the higher, they had the high levels of protein and the higher levels. When you look at some of the work around rabbit starvation, some of the research and, historical accounts of rabbit starvation, and I know that I think in some division of the military, they tell soldiers that if they're isolated and they have no access to food, if they only have access to rabbits, that it's better if they just fast than eat the rabbit meat, because it's so lean that if they eat a lot of it, that it'll take more in terms of energy to break down and vitamins than they get back from.
Why couldn't they eat the fattier parts of the rabbit?
Yeah, apparently there's just not enough fat on them.
Like the liver is probably fatty. Skin's probably somewhat fatty. I mean, skin is some of the fattiest parts of an animal, but I don't know. Actually, I don't know any human beings that eat rabbits. Yeah. So I don't know.
It's very popular in Prague. It's like the only.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, it's like on all the menus. It's like a big delicacy, but they also eat organ meats like liver, beef heart, and all that. It's part of the culinary culture here. So, it's probably the only place I've been to that you see a lot of rabbit on the menu.
Does it taste like chicken?
I haven't tried it yet. I just, it's just not appetizing to me. From like bunny rabbits growing up, and having them as pets and whatnot. But
you're right. That doesn't sound appetizing.
I love organ meat, so I eat a lot of liver and a lot of organ meats. But it's just interesting to me that they're basically saying, like, don't eat the rabbit meat, just fast, because it'll cost you more metabolically to break that down in terms of the B vitamins and everything than you'll actually get from it, which is just really interesting, because your study kind of shows that in those high levels and the high levels of protein, that they had the least amount of body fat. And so I really wonder what your theories are on why that happened.
Yeah, that's a good question. So some people oppose sort of the obvious explanations. One, they said, well, maybe they were eating, they overestimated their caloric intake, so they were eating less, which is kind of ironic because people who are bodybuilders are very good with counting calories and grams of protein, carb, fat.
Right.
And usually people say, well, people tend to underestimate their intake. So I'm thinking, well, if people tend to underestimate their intake, I mean, these guys are actually eating more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I never have bought that explanation. The other ones are obviously there's a huge thermic effect of protein, and then maybe, and I didn't measure this, and I wanted to look into this, and then I sort of got sidetracked and went to another project. But I wanted to see if eating a lot of protein prompted people to just move more. You know, the NEAT, the NEAT.
Yes.
Just to see if maybe because you're kind of uncomfortable being hot, that maybe moving around you feel better because you have all this energy. But I never pursued that. I never pursued that project. I ended up sort of shifting over to doing some sports neuroscience stuff. But I think that those are probably the two most plausible explanations: just the thermic effect of protein, and also the effects on non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I mean, that's a guess, but it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting though. Now, what is your take in general on dieting? A lot of our listeners are interested in, optimizing their body composition, losing fat, building more muscle and strong bones. So what's your overall, take as with regards to diet?
Okay, overall take. Well, once I get to diet, first the foundation is you got to train like crazy. Although you say you're not super active, you follow your diet more than your activity. But I think that has to serve as a foundation because people who train tend to follow their diet better in general.
Yes.
With that being said, after looking at all these different diets, and the ISSN published a position paper on diets and how it affects body composition, and it seems that the single most important factor for success is adherence.
Yes.
And so different people. Well, let me backtrack a little. I grew up, I was originally born in the Philippines, but grew up in the United States. So I grew up in a household where foods in the Philippines tend to be rice, meat, and vegetables. So what do I eat as an adult? Rice, meat, and vegetables. So you grow up eating a certain way, and it's very hard to change those habits. However, if body composition is a goal, whether you're eating a traditional higher carb diet like in Asian countries, or a ketogenic diet, or a Mediterranean style diet, any of those diets will work in improving body composition. But I think the common factor that has to be taken into account with all of them is a higher protein intake than what's currently recommended, in terms of the RDA. I think protein is the key for maintaining good body composition. And I tell people, figure out how much protein you should consume, let's say a gram per pound roughly, and then backfill the rest of your diet with carbs and fat. But start with the premise that you have to fill those protein needs, because what I found is when you fill those protein needs, it tends to have a satiating effect, so you tend to eat less carbs and fat. And so to me, the basis should be protein, regardless of what named diet you like to follow.
Yeah, I like how you said in another interview that the protein is the main macronutrient that determines body fat.
Oh yeah, it absolutely is. And people who have done just the simple thing of, I say just do a simple substitution. Take away 40 grams of carbs, put in 40 grams of protein, see what happens.
Right.
To a T, they all lose fat. They all lose fat.
Now, on that vein, one of the things that a lot of people encounter in the low carb, keto sort of carnivore space is that they start emphasizing and prioritizing protein more, and they see the scale go up. And I always recommend, get a body composition scan done, because the weight on the scale is probably going up, but you're probably still burning fat, gaining lean muscle. So did you see a lot of that in your research?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of my subjects, a lot of them are students, and a lot of them are students in exercise science. So they actually don't pay attention to body weight. Right. To them, all that matters is body composition. So they look at lean mass, fat mass, percent fat. If I hear someone mention their body weight, I find it odd, because I'm like, no one ever mentions body weight around me. Which is kind of refreshing.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's just something I always encourage people to do, is just don't worry about the scale going up, because I know I shifted my body composition from close to 40% body fat down to 21, which I'm at now, and all just by prioritizing protein, being meat-based. And I gained 8 pounds of lean mass in that time.
You were 40% fat?
Almost, yeah. Almost 40, yeah. And
that's a lot.
Yeah, I know. But a lot of people don't realize that they are that high, and a lifetime of dieting can do that. You know, with chronic caloric restriction, you know, you lose water, fat, and protein, and then you put fat back on when you go off the diet. And over time, you know, people see that, and you'll have a lot of people who are toffee, like thin on the outside, fat on the inside. And I think it's a big risk for people that when they look lean, sometimes they don't know what their body composition is, which is why I encourage so much for people to test that and know what their numbers are.
Wait, what did you say, toffee? I missed that acronym.
Yeah, toffee, thin on the outside, fat on the inside.
Thin on the outside, thin on the outside, fat on the inside.
Yes.
Oh, I've never heard that. Toffee. Okay.
Yeah, like skinny fat, toffee, TOFI. And a lot of people, you know, you hear these stories of people who are like marathon runners, and they look great, they look lean, and then all of a sudden they pass away overnight, and you think they're healthy, but their body composition may not be what they think it is, or they're vegan and they've got all this subcutaneous fat. They don't realize it's there. But anyway, it's amazing what you can do just by prioritizing protein and making sure you hit that amount. But yeah, I was curious on your take, and I'm not surprised that you mostly talk to people about their body composition. And you know, I just wish everyone would have that as a measurement in their home instead of just scale.
Yeah, measuring, I mean, for people who are in our field, measuring weight is kind of, I mean, it's it's sort of like judging a beauty contest from like the neck down. I mean, you still need to see the face. So I tell people, don't worry about your body weight, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it just doesn't matter. So, but in addition to protein, you know, I always tell people take creatine, because that helps your body composition too. It helps you gain lean body mass. So protein and creatine for everybody.
And why creatine?
Well, creatine probably is the supplement that has more research behind it than anything else. Maybe caffeine is close, but a small dose of creatine, roughly 5 grams a day, taken chronically, I've been taking creatine for, 25 years, will help maintain lean body mass. And I think that's critical just for general health, performance, you name it.
So what is your interest? What kind of studies have you been doing more recently now, and what are you interested in?
Well, still doing sports nutrition. In fact, we are going to do a 1-week crash diet study. And actually, we were going to do it in March over the spring break, but can't do it, obviously. I just wanted to see, based on, I was going to have people cut calories to below 1,000, and these would be healthy people, healthy, fit people, just to see how much fat they would lose in a week, and to see how protein intake modified the amount of weight loss as well as fat loss as well as lean body mass loss. And my guess, and I think you would predict this to be true, that the people who tended to keep protein intake high were the ones who lost fat but didn't lose lean mass. And the ones who just cut calories, who cut a lot of protein, they'd lose both fat and lean mass. And it was one of those fun studies we were going to do, and unfortunately it'll have to wait till September. A couple other studies we're doing. I'm shifting some of my work, still doing sports nutrition, but also doing sports neuroscience, looking at the effects of creatine on brain function, because there's some interesting data showing that when you take creatine, it affects cognition. It affects memory. It helps with memory. It helps people. It's very useful for vegetarians or vegans because they don't eat meat, and meat has creatine. It's very useful when you get old, and there's data, I think, in the elderly, looking at people over 70 years of age, where it helps cognitive function. So that's kind of an interesting thing to see how different supplements might affect cognition, and that's sort of 50% of what I do now.
That's really interesting. Just going back to the study that you were going to do, was that going to be sort of comparing like a protein-sparing modified fast with a mixed diet?
Actually, I like doing these sort of simple studies. It was, you cut your calories by at least 50%. So if you're eating 2,000 calories, drop it to 1,000 or more if you can. And we're not going to tell the subjects what to cut. We're just going to say cut whatever. And then we're going to see if there's a relationship between the protein intake that's maintained and whether or not they lose any lean mass. Because my guess is you can go on a crash diet for 1 week, lose fat, and not lose muscle. And you're thinking, well, who the hell does that? Well, let's see, you got weddings, you got going to the beach for the summer. There's all sorts of things. Graduation, you want to lose weight. I mean, people are like, I need to lose like 10 pounds in like 1 week. I'm like, okay, well, let's see. I mean, so it was more one of those fun studies just to see. Everyone goes on a 1 week diet for whatever silly thing. So no one's ever measured it though. What are you doing? What can you lose in 1 week if you really try?
I mean, it's interesting too if you consider the amount of protein turnover that happens on a daily basis. If we have 200 to 300 grams of protein being recycled, would it be affected by by reducing your protein intake or not?
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. I don't know. So, but a simple 1 week time course study, it'll be interesting just to see what happens. And I think people will lose a lot of body water just because of glycogen loss. But it's not all going to be water loss. There's got to be some fat loss if you're not eating. I don't know if you've seen that silly show called Naked and Afraid.
Yeah, I definitely have.
Okay, so 21 days, they're basically starving. I mean, but you could see in 1 week, literally all they're doing is trying to drink water and trying to eat something. They've already lost a lot of weight in 7 days. So in a controlled setting where you get to choose what you're cutting, I would imagine you could lose just fat in 7 days and not lose any lean mass. That's just my guess.
And that's by doing like mostly protein?
Yeah, but also remember, these are people who work out. So they're training while they're doing this. These aren't sedentary people. In fact, I'd say 95% of the studies we do are on people who train. I almost never do studies on people who don't work out. So it's all exercise trained people.
That makes sense. Well, it makes sense considering the field you're into. Now, tell us about the ISSN and the event that you guys have. And I'm hoping that you guys will still be able to put on your event. Probably, I don't know if it's still going to be happening this year. Or...
Yes, it will actually. The 17th annual ISSN conference, it's in Daytona Beach, Florida. It's a beautiful beach. We moved it to September 10th to the 12th.
Oh, okay.
September 10th to the 12th. So if you can make it, well, if you love the beach, you'll love Daytona Beach. And the host hotel is actually on the beach. So you can literally walk out of the hotel, go to the beach. And of course, the trade-off is if there's a beach, we'd rather go to the beach or we'd rather sit and listen to a seminar. So there's always that competition. It's like I walk outside, I see my friends, I'm like, hey, what are you guys doing out here? They're like, it's the beach. We'd rather go to the beach than listen to someone talk science. But it's a great time. I mean, we normally have our conferences it's middle of June, but obviously this year things changed. But we're always going to be in Florida. So we're in Daytona Beach this year. We'll be in St. Petersburg next year. And then after that, we'll be in Fort Lauderdale Beach. So there's a beach theme. So if you love the beach, you should come. Okay, Vanessa, make sure you get there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sport nutrition specialist, so I definitely would love to come and check out what you guys are doing there. And I'm sure I'd love it.
Yeah, you should come and actually set up a podcast or something there and do some recording. There's probably so many people that you could have a fun time doing podcasting with.
That'd be great. Yeah. Well, where can people find more information about it, and where can people find more of your research?
Well, the best place for the conference, go to ISSN.net. That's ISSN.net. And as far as my research, actually, I present preliminary data at the ISSN conference every year. That's actually the best place to find it. And then eventually gets published, and then it's open to the public. You could find it on Google Scholar or our PubMed. Pretty much easy to find. And also we have an Instagram page. You're familiar with it. I post studies there all the time. And if people can't find stuff, they just text me or email me and I'll send them the study myself. So very easy to reach. Again, but if you can make it to Daytona Beach, go to ISSN.net. The conference is September 10th to the 12th.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Antonio, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today and sharing, results from your research and work, and I'm really looking forward to following your studies. Hopefully you can do maybe some of them virtually with people in self-isolation or something.
It's funny you bring that up. Someone else had brought that up to me. If you could do studies, like for instance, you'd be a subject, but you'd have to basically self-monitor.
Right. Just track with an app or something.
Right. And I mean, is it really any different than if you lived here? I guess technically not, because in a way, unless you live with someone, you don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're putting it on an app and they could be lying, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
is it really that different? And yeah, that's actually been brought up to me before, and something to think about, because it would be interesting just to see maybe if there are differences country to country or culturally or things like that. So, but yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, you could just take photos of everything and log it that way, and it'd be interesting. Well, again, thank you so much for being here, and look forward to hopefully checking out your event in person sometime.
Yes, please do. And if you do show up, let me know. Let me know. Thanks, Vanessa.
All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into the episode today with Dr. Antonio. It was such a wonderfully interesting, experience to have him on the show. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Fast Keto with Dr. Jose Antonio. I loved getting to have him on the show, talk all about his research on protein overfeeding studies, and it is so fascinating and interesting to see what he learned about protein intake, prioritizing protein, and having lower body fat in his subjects. And I hope you guys enjoyed learning about some of his research and can look forward to following more of what he's going to be putting out. And his latest work and studies sound really, really interesting. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what your takeaways or insights were from the episode. I would love to hear them over on Instagram. And if you would like to try out keto with me as your coach and guide, I have keto carnivore plans, which are the phase 2 higher protein plans. If you want to try out a higher protein approach to keto, check out the phase 2 higher protein plans at ketogenicgirl.com. That's www.ketogenicgirl.com. And those plans have a higher protein approach. It is what I have been doing, and it's based on what I've been doing for the past couple of years, which has really helped me optimize my body composition, get it from 34%, initially 40, then 34, then 21% body fat from following this keto carnivore high protein approach. So if you want to try it out with me as your guide and coach, all of the meal plans, including the phase 2 higher protein plans, come with my support and guidance and coaching in our coaching group online. And I would absolutely love to help you get the results that you want to see. As you heard from today's episode, prioritizing protein and higher protein intakes can really help lower body fat on the body. So check out those at ketogenicgirl.com. Leave me a rating or review if you get a chance. Hit the like button, subscribe, and you will get notifications when I put out new episodes. So until the next episode, I'm wishing you all a fat-fueled rest of your day. Bye for now.